All right. Okay, class, I am not going to lock your screens because I would like you to be able to follow along with me. I'm just going to show you some things in Mudbox that I've had a few questions from my students about. Make sure this is not coming through. There we go. All right. So I've had a few questions in this creature creation project we're doing. One is how to take your character or your base mesh you brought in and increase how many arms they have, how many legs they have, how many tails they have, how many heads they have, any part of them. And the simplest way to do that is just to make a duplicate of the object and then tear it apart, basically. So here's how we do that. I'm going to start off by adding in a new mesh because I don't have anything in my viewport. You do because you've already been sculpting your character. So I'll add the reptile. There he is. Alright, so let's say we wanted to give him 2 tails instead of 1 tail. So first thing we need to do is in the object list over here, right click on our reptile object and duplicate object. So now we see one called reptile 1. I'm going to go ahead and rename that. So right click, rename object, and I'm just going to call it tail because that's what it's going to be eventually. Alright, and if we go get our select move tools down here and switch to the translate tool for moving it, pull that guy out and see that that is indeed a separate object. Okay, so now we want to get rid of the rest of the lizard and just keep the tail. So first thing we want to do is hide the other one, just to get him out of the way. A little dot right there will make it not visible. Okay, so now with the tail object selected, we're going to go to our faces tool down here. Now depending on your object, if you go to your UV view, we can actually see that the tail is separated in UVs. I don't want this to be too complicated, so I'm not going to explain what UVs are right now. Realize that is a method you could use to choose that if you wanted, but I'm going to show you how to do it with faces in case you don't have yours UV maps like that. Okay, so with faces, we're just going to make a selection of the tail. So I need to make my brush a little larger by holding the B key down and just drag to the right. You just want it to be bigger than the diameter of the tail. Okay, so we're going to just paint on a selection by just dragging over that tail. And I do want to turn on wireframe by hitting W so we can actually see the lines of polygons, because we want this to be kind of a perfect edge there where the selection stops. You can see that there's more of a brighter yellow line where it stops. So we want that to be a continuous edge, like an edge loop. We wouldn't want it to kind of come out right here and then stick out, like if we were to go like, maybe if I made my brush really small, something like this, and I were to choose just that polygon. We would not want that because then we'd have this little edge sticking out. We want it to be kind of more of a perfect loop. Okay, so now that the tail's selected, I could hit delete and actually just delete the tail. There's a hole in the back of him now and it's just the lizard. But I don't want to do that. I want to delete the rest of him. So I'm going to hit Control Z to get that tail back. And then I'm going to go up to File, or sorry, Edit, and choose Invert Face Selection. It's going to select everything else except for what you had selected before. Alright, so now I can hit Delete on that, and I've got just a tail ready to apply to my existing reptile. So I'll turn the reptile back on, got the tail selected, I'll get the Translate tool again, just position that over towards the lizard here, and then I'm going to rotate it so it looks a little more natural. Oops, select, move, rotate, drag that green, just to rotate it out a little bit. Okay, now, of course, naturally we would want to move the other tail so it's a little more symmetrical, but that's not what I'm showing you here. So let me just jump over to the Sculpt tools, and I'm just going to get the Grab tool. It's probably the most used Sculpt tool right here, the Grab tool. You can really just kind of mold things how you want them to be. So I'm going to make my brush larger, and I'm going to actually turn off mirroring, okay, because we don't want to do that on both sides. Turn off mirroring if you had it on. And then we can just kind of shove this tail into the body of the lizard to make it look a little more natural, like it's growing out of that lizard. I think I'm actually going to shove it a little closer to him, so I'm just going to go back to the Translate tool and just kind of pull this forward. Oops. Make sure you got the right object. Translate, tail. Now here's another interesting thing. I keep trying to do that and it's moving the lizard, and that's kind of annoying. And that can happen here in Mudbox as you do things. It'll affect the other object and you don't want it to. So this is a really important thing. We can click the little lock symbol next to the object, and now it can't be painted on, it can't be sculpted on, it can't move, it is locked down. So that's great. So now we can get back to our Sculpt tool, Grab tool, and we can start really shoving the base of that tail down into the lizard, make it look like it's actually growing out of him. Okay, so hopefully you can see how powerful and useful that is to be able to just separate parts of your model out and duplicate it. You could do the same thing if you just wanted to remove a leg, like maybe you wanted a three-legged lizard, right? So it looks pretty unnatural right now because it's yellow. It doesn't look like it's blending. And the materials are a little different. But if we turn off our lock, it looks pretty similar. There we go. And turn off the wireframe. And you may want to use your smooth tool also, just by holding shift down, it kind of smooths, just to blend it in there a little more. Okay, and right now the shading doesn't look right. Like it's getting kind of dark right at that edge, but that's okay because when you come back to add texture and paint on it, it'll look, it'll kind of take care of that. Now this is not the best practice for how to actually make 3D models. You're supposed to actually connect the polygons, but for this simple project for adding things on, that seems like the best way to do it. Okay, so that's one thing I wanted to show you. I'm just going to delete these characters now. It's a very useful thing to be able to take those off. Okay, so I had a question yesterday from a student how to add wings onto a character or a creature. So let's go add another creature in here. Let's add a T-Rex. Okay, so we can go get a 3D model from anywhere and bring that into Mudbox to add on to our creature, such as wings or anything you can think of. So a good place to get that, I know specifically where some wings are for free. If you go to Google, oh, we got a question in our chat. I have no sound. Let me turn that on. I am live broadcasting this on the internet right now, by the way. Check, check. Sound settings. For some reason my mic isn't coming through. It's using the microphone on my webcam, that's why. Check, check. Can you hear me, Shelby? Oh, she hears me. Okay. Good. All right. Sorry about that. Oh, man. Trolls in the chat already. Okay, so moving back here, we're going to add some wings onto this T-Rex. So start off by just going to Google, and you're going to search for Mudbox Community. COMMUNITY community. All right, so the actual website is area.autodesk.com/Mudbox community. So this is basically like a forum for people to post up stuff for free that other Mudbox users can get. So if you go to the library tab at the very top, there's a whole bunch of stuff you can get from here, textures, stamps, models that you can add in for your projects. Ignore this douche right here with a cigarette in his mouth. I don't know what's up with that, but we'll just search for wings. There we go. All right, so here's membrane wings, and I can just hit download. And it's gonna give it to us in a zip file, okay? So depending on your computer, you may not have WinRAR installed, but zip will open by default. So just hit save file. And depending on your web browser, it may not look exactly like this, but just download that zip file. Go to your location where it is located and just double click that file. Now I have WinRAR installed, so again, yours may not look like this, but just open up the zip file and drag the .mud file out of there to your desktop. This is a very important step. You do have to move that MUD file out of the zip file to your computer before you can use it in Mudbox. Now I've already done this, so it's saying replace the file. It's okay. There we go. So now we have a .mud file on our desktop called membrane wings. All right, so now back into Mudbox, we want to just choose File, Import, and we're going to go to our desktop. If you don't see desktop on your left side here, you want to just click on this PC and go to desktop. Okay, so there's membrane wings. Hit open. Boom. Now one thing you'll notice, as soon as I brought it in, my T-Rex got brighter. Can anyone out there tell me why it got brighter? Good guess, but no, that's not it. I'll just tell you because we're broadcasting. It added another light. So because this was a full Mudbox file, it gave us a new light and a new material. So I'm just going to delete that second light because I don't think we need it. I will just right click and delete the light. Students in my classroom, if you get lost in this demonstration, don't miss something, it's okay. This is being recorded. It's going to be online. You can go back and look at it in a second. And as soon as I'm done with the broadcast, I can help you personally. Okay, so we've got the wings in there, but they're very tiny. It says bat wings in the object list. So what we need to do is go to our select move tools, get the translate tool first, and I'm just going to pull those up onto the T-Rex's back, something like that. And then I'm going to go ahead and scale them up to be appropriate size. So the scale tool right here, and drag the middle cube to scale it on all axes a couple of times. About like that. Okay. Now they're backwards, so that looks weird. So let's rotate them with the rotate tool. And we could just drag the red axis like this and flip them, but we can see that that is corresponded with the first rotate over here. So if I just type in 180, it's going to make them exactly flipped over. Okay,
So that's great, but the wings are not actually touching the body of the T-Rex. We need to make it look like those wings are coming out of him, right? So let's use that technique we just learned of locking down the T-Rex. So select the T-Rex and click the little lock symbol. So now that T-Rex can't be messed with at all, and we can begin sculpting our wings to fit in. So sculpt tools, and I'm going to get the grab tool. Very useful, the grab tool. I'm going to hold the B key down on my keyboard and drag to the right to increase the size of my brush. Okay, and I'm going to make sure mirroring is on the X plane. That way, whatever I do on this side, it'll do it on the other side as well. And just start kind of shoving those wings down into the body of the T-Rex. And as you do this, you'll want to move your camera around so you can see it at better angles. Because sometimes you think you're moving it the right direction, but you're actually not. So just kind of shove that wing right there into the body of the T-Rex. There we go. Something like that. Now the wings look really flat, so that's usually not how wings look. So let's make our brush even bigger and give this a little bit more form. So just kind of pull these up in a few different places just to give it a little more form. There we go. Something like that. I'm not going to make it perfect for time's sake. You'll want to adjust yours exactly how you want it to be. Okay, so now he has some wings. But let's take this a step further. So those wings are pretty flat and a little shiny. We want to get some nice surface detail on there. So we could do that with the sculpt tool, just getting the sculpt brush, go in to choose a stamp and make this a little smaller, hold the B key down. We could add some surface detail in here, sculpting on this. Oh, strength is way down. Let me hold my strength and just pull that up so you can see this a little better. Bat wings, yes. So one thing to keep in mind, before you do any detail work, like using a stamp, you do need to increase your subdivision levels. Right now, we're only at level 0. So we need to give it more polygons. We hit the W key, we can see very few polygons. So we hit Shift D, and that's going to increase how many polygons are on this. And that'll allow us to sculpt in some detail. Okay? See that? So now when I sculpt, it's giving us some of that surface detail. There we go. So that's going to make it look more realistic, like skin from the wings. Okay, so that's one method, actually using sculpting tools to do that. But I'm going to hit Control Z a bunch of times and go back to where we were, because I want to show you a different method. You can actually use the paint tools to give you height surface detail without actually sculpting. And this can be a really powerful thing. All right, so, and you got to be really careful when you go up to higher subdivision levels, because that can cause your computer to crash. All right, so over to the paint tools, I'm going to get the paintbrush. And I'm going to go to my Layers tab, or at the top over here. And I'm just going to make a new layer. Right now we are in the bat wings object, so I'll make a new layer here, and I'm just going to call this Surface Detail. And instead of the diffuse channel, diffuse is where we paint color, I'm going to choose bump value. All right, and then I'm going to go choose a stamp. Let's go get that one, I guess. Whoa. Okay, so now we may want to mess with some of the settings here. I'm going to turn the strength down quite a bit. I'm going to keep randomize on. I'm going to increase the stamp spacing some. That's how far apart the stamps are. And just kind of do some painting on here. There we go. Now that does not look like lizard skin, it looks like rocks. But you can see what that's doing. It's actually giving surface detail without sculpting. We're actually doing it in the paint channel, which is really cool. There's a lot you can do with that. And you can bring in any type of image you want as the stamp to use with it. Okay, so that's the bump value. Now let's make a new layer, and I'll call this color. And by default, oh, whoops, that actually put it in the bump value, so let me delete that. My mistake. So be careful when you're making a new layer. It's going to keep it the same channel. So switch that back to diffuse, and I'll call that color. Channel, diffuse, color. Okay. So now we have a separate layer just for color. And I'll choose this, I guess, because it's a very obvious color. There we go. So now that layer is contributing some color. Cancel. You notice when I started to paint on the T-Rex, it tried to create a new layer. But I don't want to paint on the T-Rex, so I'm going to cancel that. Ah, okay. There we go. Just painting some more color on there. All right. I don't want to make this tutorial too long, so hopefully you got something out of this, and you can use this to apply to your creatures. Let me know if you have any questions, and thanks for watching.